Building a deck is often about winning. Sometimes it's about winning with style. Today we're doing neither of those things. Today we want to cast this card as many times as possible in a single game for as high a stakes as we can. See, this card makes a real philosophy dilemma suddenly play out in your Magic game. The Prisoner's Dilemma. Explaining it fully is a little beyond the remit of this deck tech, so I'll keep it short. Two partners in crime are locked in prison, suspected of a theft. If they rat the other out, they go free as part of the plea deal, but their partner gets a longer sentence. If they both stay quiet, they both get a short amount of jail time, but if they both rat their partner out, they both get longer in jail. But the kicker is they don't know what the other party is going to do. The card Prisoner's Dilemma basically makes each opponent vote to the same effect. If each opponent aims to take 0 damage by snitching, they may take 8 instead. Or if one person does the right thing for everyone by staying quiet, their reward could be 12 damage to the face. This card takes the game away from Magic for a moment into a weird and wonderful subgame that I love to see unravel. But in our deck, this dilemma has a twist. If you copy the card, for example, people remember your previous votes. Still with me? Good, then here's the other 99. First we start with the commander, who we haven't mentioned yet. Prisoner's Dilemma is expensive, and unless it kills people it does nothing, so we need to fix that. Melek, Reforged Researcher, makes the first spell we cast each turn cost 3 less, making it a much more respectable 2 mana for our dilemma. This also gives the rest of our deck a clear direction. We want lots of powerful instant and sorceries to abuse that 3 mana reduction effect. Meaning once the dilemma is done and one person remains, it's a lot easier to finish off the last player with a massive body. However, because Commander is a 100 card format, we won't draw a dilemma every time, even with tutors. So I've included some backup copy spells that I will also enjoy copying a lot. Tempted by the Mara and Truthful Consequences may or may not be the most powerful choice, but as a Doctor Who fan, as well as the fact they give your opponents a choice of what happens, they fit the theme of the deck very well, and I still want to copy them a lot. So these 3 cards are the core purpose of the deck. Mystical Tutor and Solve the Equation also fit into this slot, as while they can find something else in a pinch, ideally we just want to find whatever fun card we want to copy. But that leaves a lot of deck space. Firstly, I'm going back to that as high stakes as we can. See, Dilemma deals between 4 and 12. It's good, but not insane. We want to up those stakes and see if it affects how people vote, so we're playing cards to maximise that. City on Fire, Fiery Emancipation and Solthim all seek to raise the stakes of our voting cards. How will the vote change when you're taking 12, 24, 36 or 0? I want to find out. Next, Melek does have a critical flaw we need to address. See, ideally, to take advantage of the mana discount would include just a ton of expensive spells we can get the discount on immediately to maximise Melek's value, but if you have no spells in the yard, Melek just dies. Not great. So before we cast him on turn 4 or 5, we need to have at least 1 spell resolves, so we play 7 cheap 1 mana spells to help with this, and a lot of 3 and 4 mana spells with the hope we can just pay 1 for full mana value before Melek if we need to. And next is the biggest section with the free mana reduction payoffs at over 30 cards. We have limited access to tutors, so sometimes we just need to draw cards the hard way to find them, and Melek really helps out here. Turns out with a free mana reduction, Fact or Fiction is pretty good as our similar cards. Importantly, Melek is each turn, not just ours, so our ideal gameplay is to cast 1 4 or 5 mana card each turn for the best advantage, which means we need a lot more instants than sorceries. Instant speed draw is king, with, well, all of these fitting the bill pretty great. I also like some of these expensive bounce spells as interaction. At just 1 mana to remove a threat for now and draw a card, it's pretty versatile. Equally, cards that can do multiple things like Soul Read and Riddle mean leaving just 1 mana up gives you a lot of flexibility. But the most powerful things we want to reduce the cost on are Treasure Makers. If we cast Melek turn 4 or 5 with 1 mana up, then cast a Pirate's Pillage, gives us mana for our next 2 turns. In a similar vein, Frantic Search, Pour, Visions and Big Score are effectively free in this deck. We do play a few expensive counterspells in the deck to take advantage of the mana discount, but bear in mind we also play a regular protection suite as well, such as Arcane Denial and Negate, as we can't protect our own dilemmas with these expensive counterspells. Out of Bounds is the cutest of these, as we can cast it for 1 mana ourselves, but if we've already cast a spell we might be able to coerce our opponents into helping us cast it. Finally, the most important section, the pet cards. There's a ton of expensive cards that are hard to fit in a regular deck, but yet again I can justify a personal favourite of Saheeli's Artistry when it costs half the mana. Answer Platform, Elministers, Duplication and Domineering Will are equally just fun. Next up, the elephant in the room. Well, the Wizard. See, these are all great once per turn, but Wizards of Fey is secretly our commander but just much better. When I cast the Wizard, I urge my opponents to kill it, lest they are responsible for the havoc it unleashes. Once it attacks in a 4-player game, All instants and sorceries cost 3 less, not just 1 per turn, and you could also cast sorceries at instant speed. This means you could often storm off on the spot with a few treasures or untapped cards. It's a truly ludicrously fun card to resolve if you like to storm off. Likewise, I do run 3 alternate win condition cards that are also just as likely to make voting a little more difficult. Gunner Snipe and Inscription make almost any game action we take slowly whittle away at our opponents, and Ignition can not only wipe out boards to buy you some time, with enough instant and sorceries in the yard it can wipe out players with Melek. The last few sections are short. We have Ramp, bog standard stuff and 1 pet card. Then we have Protection, which I've touched on but with an added foil because it's a super budget Fierce Guardian chip and I don't want to buy that card. Finally, we have our copy effects so that we can do that dilemma multiple times in a row. We have 8 cards that can directly copy our spells, and as we want to do multiple, many of them aren't cast triggers. Remember, Melek only reduces our first spell, so we can't stack together multiple copies easily. The exception is Storm King's Thunder, as simply being X means alone it can help cast a ludicrous amount of spells. Beyond that, everything else is cheap or free. Ideally, we want to combine these for many copies. My record is 4 on the stack at once, but I'm looking to break that. Finally, our mana. My mana base is budget. This deck needs a lot of blue cards early and throughout the game, but when you actually combo, most of the copy cards are red, so the mana requirements are pretty inflexible. My only colourless lands are Reliquary Tower, as our hand can get truly big, Landscape, which also fetches coloured mana, and Ghost Quarter, which can target our own lands to find a basic if we really want coloured mana in a pinch. Beyond this, only 2 lands stand out for non-mana reasons. Mystic Sanctuary to get a dilemma back, and Null, as all of our big spells are aiming to deal 7 or more, and we can also cast it if our opponents deal damage to each other, so it's a pet land in all my red decks regardless. Finally, what's not in the deck? Well, maybe the right commander. My friend suggested Warp might be a better commander for this deck, and I don't disagree, but that cost is sunk as I now own this deck in paper. Likewise, Mizzix after a few spells gives a reduction to all our spells. But what these both miss is that the way our main cards work, they are voting cards, which get much worse when there's 1 person left in the game, and then the whole point of the deck goes away. With 1 opponent, Dilemma just deals 4 damage. If you get down to the 1v1, I want to try and end the game and get to the next one, and having Melek be a 2020 really helps with that. Further, this is my paper deck, and I'll admit there are some cards on my wants list that I haven't tested yet. Sapphire Charm seems perfect, acting as an early play with card draw, temporary removal, or giving our 22/22 Melek flying. I need to find one. Whispers is likewise a card I want to test, as we can get the free mana buyback if we run out of resources. Inspired Tinkering makes a lot of treasure, and Gamble is perfect, but again, don't own them, they're on my buy list. I tried to play all the tutors for Dilemma I found, but Invasion was too expensive to find time to cast at 5 mana. And well, there's a ton of good cards for Melek I'm not playing, because their slots go to my Prisoner's Dilemma combo. This deck isn't designed to maximise the commander, so lots of value is left astray, but I will say I've had an absolute blast whenever I've used this deck, and look forward to seeing how different players react to it. My playgroup thankfully doesn't hold many grudges between matches, but you can bet they'll remember how the votes went down. And if it's new players, well, you get to step out of Magic for a second and see how they think. Commander is a social format, and this card gives new avenues to realise that. Every board state will also change the variables a little. For example, my friend's Darien deck makes it very likely they want to take the damage. How will that affect the votes? I can't wait to find out. I hope you get to soon. Feel free to subscribe for more wacky builds like this, and finally, with a deck and commander as unique as Melek, it can be hard to find the perfect cards to match the cost reduction. I feel like my search turned up a few unique cards that fit great, but it's impossible to find them all, so I want to hear your suggestions in the comments. Thanks so much for watching.